Hey y'all, stick around and see how we build this bench glider today at the Beard and Bourbon Wood Shop. Hey y'all, welcome back to the wood shop. Today I'm working on building an outdoor bench glider out of Cypress. So I'm planing all this wood right now that we've got, and we picked up from CR Muter Spa Lumber up in Xenia, about an hour away. This wood was great quality. It was pretty straight, didn't have any twisting or anything like that, so it was really easy to get planed down to thickness. Didn't have to build any sleds or anything like that, but if you're ever up in that area, up and around Xenia, Ohio, check them out. I had a really good selection of wood and good prices, and everybody's real helpful and friendly up there. So I already had these boards cut down to length. Sort of. These are 10-foot long boards that I had bought, and just to make it a little bit easier to manage in the shop, I cut them down a little bit shorter to the longest length that I was going to need, with a little bit of room to spare there. So just to make it more manageable around the shop. But this is not a big deal to plane here. So once I got done planing, I moved over and just kind of sanded them down with 80 grit, just to remove any kind of planing marks or anything like that, just to get them cleaned up a little bit. So here I moved over to the miter saw, just cutting these boards to length. These are going to be for the slats for the bench. So I've got, I'm going to get 2 cuts out of these boards that I need to make lengthwise before I can go rip the slats out of them. So that's what I'm doing here. Alright, so moved over to the table saw. I'm just ripping these down, getting, I think, 3 or 4 slats per board. I think it was 1.5 inches wide on these slats for the most part. I think I ended up having to cut 2 extras in the end, and I cut those at 1 3/4 inches just to make up for some gaps that I had based on my spacing that I chose, which ended up working out perfectly. But so yeah, I've got a new my new table saw here that I'm using. I'm super excited about. I even got to open the garage door and work for a little bit, get a nice cool breeze going. It was nice. This new shop layout is fantastic. I'm loving it. So easy to work around and walk around and move wood around and stuff like that. So way better than my little tiny shed that I was working in. So this is not my design. I bought the plans for this glider online, I believe from Etsy, and I can leave a link in the description. But I was really looking for like a parts list, I guess, or a cut list. Wasn't sure how much wood I was going to need for this, so that was kind of helpful. But it also came with these templates that I was able to piece together and trace it onto some Luan and get those cut out. And that's what I'm doing here, is I'm tracing those Luan templates onto the Cypress, and then end up taking it over to the bandsaw and cutting it out that way. But then these templates I can just hang on to and use if somebody else wants me to build another one of these. So here I am cutting those parts out on the bandsaw, and there's quite a few parts to cut out, but the templates really helped out a lot. This was one of the armrests that I'm cutting out. Had a good curve on the end of it. Ends up getting a cup holder hole cut out of it here soon. You'll see that here in a minute, but this is where I'm cutting this out, and I realized that I've got a very dull blade on my bandsaw at this point, so that made this a little fun. Yeah, so this is the finished arm. I cut right up next to that line, and I'm going to attach the template to this board using some double-sided tape, and which is what you see here, and use a 1/2 inch flush trim compression bit on my router table to just trim this up, get it all nice and flush and cleaned up. And that did a really good job cleaning that wood up and getting it to match the template perfectly, except a few spots that had a couple 90-degree angles in here, like this notch here in the armrest, I had to do a little chisel work on. So here I am putting a 3/8 inch round over on all the slats. Just ripping these through here real quick. Just wanted to round the top edges off to make it a little bit more comfortable, obviously. So these are 3/4 inch thick, so I just went with, like I said, a 3/8 inch round over bit. So here I am attaching the two armrests together and using some of that double-sided tape. Got to drill some holes in these. So the plans called for a 4-inch hole for the cup holder and then a 1-inch hole. And I wasn't really sure what this was for. The plans weren't clear. And in hindsight, when I got done with this project, you'll see that I kind of wish I just hadn't have cut this hole because it doesn't serve any purpose. I think its main design was to be able to run a chain through this if you want to, suspend it like a swing as opposed to a glider, but ended up not using this. Here I am actually put this clip in here for my son to show him that, when you're done with your tools, you put them away in their location. It's great. So anyway. So I've drilled some holes in these armrests a little bit using my jigsaw here to cut out a circle, and you can see I'm generating quite a bit of smoke here. This was a brand new blade. It's not a junk blade or anything like that, but this Cypress is pretty rough on some blades, it seems. I probably should have done this one armrest at a time, but I got them stuck together just trying to knock them out as quick as I could. So I ended up having to just slow way down on this cut to just cut this circle out, and I cut it out rough, and then I had a template that I cut out of MDF on the drill press with the 4-inch hole saw that I took over to the router table and just cleaned that circle up, and it worked perfect. So here again, the armrests are done. I'm going ahead and putting a 3/8 inch round over on the tops of these just to get these cleaned up. And on the bottom side, I ended up just using an 1/8 inch round over bit just to soften the edges a bit. So here I'm just sanding all these parts with, started off with 80 grit, went up to 120, and then I'm using that 1/8 inch round over bit in my palm router just to soften all the edges that were going to be exposed. So just using some hand sanding there as well to clean up some of the curves and everything like that. So. Okay, so now I'm on to the base parts, and this is the big 2-inch thick board that I've got. It's 10 feet long. I haven't even planed this yet or anything like that. I'm using my template parts to kind of lay out where the parts are going to go. I knew I wasn't going to have a whole lot left over here. The plans called for two 10-foot 2x4s made from cedar, and obviously we didn't use cedar, we used cypress. But so this is a 8-inch wide, 10 feet long, 2-inch thick board. And I'm kind of perplexed here how I'm going to get all these parts out of this piece of wood. It was just not working out the way I had planned. So what I ended up doing is going out and using cut list optimizer to kind of figure out how to lay out all my parts on this to get everything cut. And I really only had a couple inches of wood left over at the end of this. So I was able to off camera get this board planed down and then ripped in half, and then got all the parts cut out of here. So this is me just kind of cutting it down to length, getting some parts cut out of this and making it a little bit more manageable to deal with. So yeah, and that little piece on the end is all I ended up having left out of that. So that used up pretty much every bit of that board. So here I am just kind of setting up the table saw. I'm going to make some half laps. here in a second. Here I'm just kind of ripping everything down to the right width. Ended up having to take a little bit off there, but here I'm using my PowerTech miter gauge and fence with a stop block to make these half lap joints here for the base. That went really well. That miter gauge is pretty sweet. I went and bought that for this project, knowing that I was going to have to be cutting some angles and doing some half laps, and the factory miter gauge on this saw is awful. So I'll leave a link in the description for this if you're interested, but this is a pretty good setup. It worked great. Highly accurate. So here I'm back at the bandsaw, cutting out some more of the shapes for this the base here. Alright, so I got these pieces cut out, and I'm back to attaching the template to it and heading back over to the router table to kind of flush trim this all up and clean it up a little bit. So this one has some curves in it that were cut pretty rough, so this compression bit did really good cleaning this up. And now it's time for assembly. So this is the front stretcher. I'm using some 90-degree clamps to keep everything squared up. Drilling a couple quarter-inch holes here. You're using a quarter-inch stainless steel hardware on all this. So I've got some carriage bolts and some stainless locking nuts that I'm using to hold everything together. So I put this together just to make sure everything was fitting right, and then I took it apart, added a little bit of wood glue in there, and tightened everything back down. So making sure to use my squares on everything to keep it square. So now we're looking at the seat stretchers. So this is the back support, the long piece, and then you got the actual seat support there. And these are cut at, I believe, 15-degree angles, and then on each end there's these filler pieces. And this is where things get a little bit wonky with the plans. I cut everything exactly according to the plans, all the angles and everything like that, and this did not make sense. So these filler pieces should line up with the back stretcher, but there's a big gap. The plans called for a 23-degree angle on these filler pieces, but the back and the seat supports are cut at a 15-degree angle, so didn't make much sense to me. I stared at it for a little bit. I knew I was going to have to fix it. Luckily I had enough wood to recut those pieces if I needed to, so I think I just needed to think about how to get that angle to work right. I put some thought into that. While I was thinking through that, I know I had to drill a hole through all four of these back stretchers, so I took those over to the drill press, got those drilled out. I needed to get 2 holes drilled in these back supports for the carriage bolts to attach them to the actual seat supports. Problem was my drill bit wasn't quite long enough on this first go. I had to kind of drop it down in the chuck a little bit and kind of carry it through there, but no big deal. And while I was drilling that out, the spring on my drill press return handle popped off, and that was fun. So all I heard was a snap, and all of a sudden I was not getting any return tension on that, so I had to take that apart and realize the spring was all tore up. So this is an old drill press, but that I just got from a family member. So drill press is out of commission for a bit until I get that spring replaced. So what I did was I recut the filler piece at a different angle, built new templates and everything like that, just so in the future I don't mess up again. But I don't know that there was a mistake made. I just think that I cut everything in the very beginning, and I should have just waited until the very end to use a miter gauge to figure out what this angle was, just to make sure you nail it the first time. Lesson learned. I think it's just a combination of just everything being off just a tiny bit, just kind of added up to a slightly different angle is all. And that's not a big deal. I had enough wood to remake the part, so it wasn't a big deal. So we got the back support bolted onto the seat stretcher, and now here I am gluing and screwing the filler piece onto that seat stretcher. Got everything perfectly lined up. So here we are attaching the seat supports to that front stretcher, and they get screwed in through the front of the seat stretcher into those supports. So what I did is counter drilled those, and then what I'm going to do is fill those with plugs, and you'll see that here in a little bit. Just screwing these in with some exterior grade screws. So the two middle supports, I had to measure the width of this, and because I absolutely suck at math, I have my handy dandy construction calculator to tell me exactly where to put these two center stretchers. I know that's a cheat code. So I got the position for the two center supports, and then what I did was I created a spacer to use so I can keep both of those center stretchers or center supports in the right spot while I attach them. Again, with those 90-degree clamps, I really like those. I'll leave a link in the description. I picked those up on Amazon a while ago, I think, and they've been really helpful. I use them on just about every project. So here you can see that spacer that I'm using to keep everything kind of square and evenly spaced on both sides. I use the same spacer on either side to make sure that everything's equal distant from the two ends. Okay, so we moved on to the slats now. I've got the seat supports and the back supports, everything bolted together and squared up. And these slats will keep everything square moving forward. There are two that are shorter. These are 1.5 inches wide. The plans don't really mention spacing. There's an accompanying YouTube video for the person I think that made these plans that I think they chose 1/2 inch spacing, which I didn't like the look of that. So I ended up going with 1/8 inch spacing, so a much narrower gap. But I ended up using just some Luan from my templates as a spacer. And then I attached one end, and I pre-drilled these holes. I'm using 1 5/8 finish head screws, exterior grade, of course, on these. So really small hole. I was able to just kind of drill a real small pilot hole through these and get them attached. And then later on, you'll see here, I mixed some sanding dust with some wood glue and used that as filler to fill those holes. And then I got all those kind of cleaned up later on. And this ended up working really well. It's really solid. The last slat on the back, if you can see in this picture, has a little bit of a gap, which I just didn't like. And because of my spacing, I ended up needing to cut at least one more slat for the top on the back side. So what I ended up doing is cutting two at 1 3/4 inches, and now you see in this picture where I've replaced that bottom, the last slat on the bottom with that slightly wider one, and that filled in that gap. And then that very top one on the back side of it, that's 1 3/4 inches as well, and that filled out the whole back not very nicely. So here you can see a front view of that front stretcher. I've got the holes that I've counterbored filled with the plugs already and got them flushed up, so I'm just sanding those up right now. So here's where I'm showing where I fill those little screw holes with some homemade wood putty, I guess, the sanding dust and Type-On 3. This ended up working out okay. It dried a little bit darker than I liked, but it ended up in the end working out okay. So now I've put the base together off camera. These are all just half lap joints. So half laps, glued and screwed. Base ended up being really solid. But the half lap joints turned out okay. I don't have the best dado blade, so they were a little bit rough. So my half laps didn't end up perfect, but they were pretty close. I was able to get it cleaned up and just had to use a little bit of filler on a gap here and there. So once the glue dried for the screw holes, I just went back in with a little small hand planer and got everything cleaned up. And here I am with the smoothing plane, also hitting that too. So, hey y'all, just wanted to give a quick update on this bench glider project that I've been working on for a while now. Did some work off camera late last week, mainly because my phone died. I am in the market of trying to upgrade to an actual camera with one that you can actually swap batteries in and out of. So I always have a battery that's charged and an actual SD card. I remember when our phones used to be able to do that and all that good stuff, but they took that away from us for some reason.
What a time to be alive.
Crazy times. Anyway, so I put this base together. I finished up the arms. I've got one cup holder to put in. We're going to finish this up today. So I just want to give a quick update. So let me bring in here and show you what I did with this base real quick. Okay, so the base, the legs are put together with half lap joints. The glider bracket's installed here. The front stretcher, when I glued this up, you leave a space, and then the leg brace is there, so it just fits in there. The back stretcher screws in. I've got the screw holes filled in with plugs that I made with a plug cutter, so you can't see the screw holes there. So this is all just half laps glued and screwed together. So the base is solid. I did put a coat of spar urethane down here on the feet where it's going to be sitting on the deck, just to help, ward off any water, like just constantly coming in contact with that, just to give it a little bit of protection. Because we're not going to be putting a finish on this. Since it's Cypress, it can sit outside in the weather just like cedar can. No harm, no foul, but I figured it can't hurt to put a little bit of extra protection on the feet there. So that is the base. Today, I got to finish. I did get the arms attached, a 3-inch carriage bolt in the back through the back seat support here. Just went through with a nut and bolt with a locking nut there and a washer. And then did 2 screws down through the top into this support that we had in the very beginning. And then I made plugs for those screws so you can't see those. I was careful to try to line up the grain and find wood that had a grain match. It's not perfect, but I got it close. Then the cup holders are here. I kind of modified the design a little bit because the original design called these cup holders sticking out past this, and that was just messing with my OCD a little bit. So I cut a curve on here so it kind of met up with the edge of this. So it looks a little bit better. I've got one more to install. I used pocket hole screws just to attach it so you don't have any more screws coming in through the top and the side of this. So thought that was cleaner. And then, so today, all I got to do is add the other cup holder to this side, and we've got legs to attach to this, to the actual top. And then we attach the actual glider part to the base and get everything buttoned up. So that's going to be a 2-person job. My dad's going to come over and help me with that here in a little bit once we get to that point. So, but yeah, we're going to wrap this up today. So just got some finish sanding to do, and we're in good shape. So this project is coming along. So stick around and see how we finish this thing up. So, yeah, right after this, my phone died, of course, so I lost all the footage for attaching the legs and getting the seat hooked up to the base, but we got that done. It was pretty straightforward. You just kind of hook the legs up to the glider brackets and run some bolts through and tighten it up, and you're done. So this was a pretty simple project overall. The plan's really good. There's a lot of steps. If you're if you're milling your own lumber and everything like that, it takes a little bit longer. But making the templates took a little bit of time to get everything dialed in, but it saved a lot of time in the end and made this a repeatable process. So, as always, if you like what you see, hit that thumbs up button, help us out. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see what we got cooking next. I got a couple projects on deck that are going to be pretty fun. So check us out on Facebook, check us out on Instagram, and see what we're doing. Give us a shout. Thank you very much.